All right. Again, thank you for joining us for our webinar today. For those who might have missed the original introduction, my name is Karen Chen. I am the product manager of QP Workforce, employee feedback tool. I'll be moderating this webinar today. Today we have with us Jamie Nodder and Charlie Judy from WorkXO. WorkXO is a leading workplace culture advisory firm that has pioneered several groundbreaking concepts like the workforce genome and the millennial alignment scan. Combined, Charlie and Jamie here have over 40 years of diverse experiences. Jamie has written several award-winning books, such as When Millennials Take Over, while Charlie has been the VP of HR of several Fortune 500 companies. Between the two, we are very confident that they can give you a full and varied view on today's topic. Before we go any further, I would just like to remind our audience that we are taking questions. You can post in the chat box of the GoToWebinar or tweet us at #QuestionPro, #WorkXO, Make Secret HR. This webinar will be recorded and you will receive a link with a summary and a recording at the end of this webinar. And with no further ado, I'm going to let our speakers take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen, and good afternoon, good morning, everybody. This is our third Question Pro WorkXO webinar, and we've had a lot of fun doing it before. This is Charlie, and my partner Jamie will chime in here in just a second. A couple of things to kind of kick this thing off. So I spent 25 years or so in the world of work, and primarily as an HR leader. I think we might say some things on this call that, could put people in a little bit of a defensive posture, particularly if you're an HR professional listening to this. So I want to preface it all by just saying, you know what, I lived this, I breathed it, and I'll be the first to take responsibility for, things that we may have done to compromise our relevance, which is really what this call is all about, talking about relevance and understanding that the best way that we can add value to any organization, whether we're talking about HR or finance or IT or whatever, is to understand and then focus on where exactly we can make an impact to the people that matter. And in our case, that's our employees. So I think we want this to be short and sweet and simple. Work and people are complicated, but they don't have to be hard. And so we're going to really try to give some relevant thoughts that you can take back to your workplaces and maybe even just start thinking about today. So before we jump into the content, Jamie, would you like to just say a few words or introduce yourself a little bit further?
Sure. No, I'm excited to be here as always. I love doing these webinars with you and with Question Pro. I appreciate you, Charlie, sort of setting the stage that in fact we might push some people's buttons or get in a little bit of HR's face. I find that easier to do myself since I'm not from HR originally. I have some training in organization development, and I've been working in organizations as a consultant for a long time. My original background's actually in conflict resolution, so normally I'm not the one to get in people's face, but on this particular topic I am, because most of my work in the last several years, as you know, Charlie, has been very focused on organizational culture, and I see it as becoming more and more important to organizations and their success, and I am not currently happy with how shall I say this, the role that HR is choosing to play right now on that topic. I think they need to be pushed, and so I might do a little pushing today, so be forewarned.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, well, so let's get in, and I think the way that we want to try to do this is have some banter, but we'll share some observations, and Jamie and I will kind of push on each other a little bit. This is a really, there are any number of quotes out there around HR, and this is actually a pretty recent one, but also pretty powerful. And I think it has a lot to do with relevance, right? I mean, this is the perfect irony in the world of work, in that the C-suites, the CEOs, the C-suite, the board really recognize pretty readily that human capital is a top challenge and maybe one of the most important things for them to be focused on. Yet the group, and certainly the person or persons who are ostensibly charged with kind of leading that charge, or focusing and investing on that challenge, are consistently kind of undervalued and maybe ranked as less important even than other functions in responding to that challenge. And I think that says something about misalignment, something about our function, HR, having lost its focus, its way. I have said over the years, and I still believe this, that in this relentless pursuit to become more strategic, which is what the HR organization has been told now for decades, get a seat at the table, become a strategic business partner, so on and so forth. We lost focus on the one thing that is really most essential to why we're there, and that's the people that we serve, the individual, the human being, etc. And so we focused on things like strategies, and we focused on things like programs, and we focused on things like workflow and efficiency and bottom line, all of which are important, but we took our eye off the ball in the process. So I think this is a little bit about getting our eye back on the ball. I also think, and then I'll be quiet, and Jamie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on relevance as well. I also think that blaming HR is like the universal excuse for poor leadership. I mean, it is very easy to look at HR and say they're not doing what they should be doing. Well, the fact of the matter is we all have a responsibility in becoming relevant for our employees. And to suggest that HR has become less important in that is in my mind, a cop-out. So I don't know if this is an image campaign or if it's a rebranding effort or if it's a focus effort, an alignment effort, which I think was what we'll talk about today. But let's recognize that there's some context that's contributing to all of that. Jamie, what are your thoughts on this, this quote or relevance? Yeah.
Maybe I'll push back a little. I agree with you. The sort of blame HR is a lame leadership ploy. Just honestly, like blaming anybody is, right? Like if you go into the blame game, then you sort of miss the point. But that being said, I do not think this is an image issue. In fact, I think the relevance piece around HR is because HR tried too hard to seem strategic. Right? They tried to appear strategic, to weave in numbers and business goals into what they're doing, as opposed to literally figuring out what is it that makes them strategic. Because I think the rest of the C-suite will see their importance when that is demonstrated in really clear, tangible ways. And so to some extent, I think they got a little distracted, as they have been for a long time. I think around, but we're so busy doing the administrative functions, and that's taking away from our time to be strategic. And I kind of don't buy that, because I think all the other functions have administrative aspects of them as well, so that doesn't stop them. But I feel like it was like trying to it's like they were seeking approval. Like you shouldn't want approval. You should just be doing awesome stuff. And that's, I think, where they sort of got steered wrong. And it's even relevant, I think, to the next slide we're going to talk about, which is the sort of engagement. Like I think HR figured out, employee engagement's really important. Let's focus on that, and got so consumed with that they didn't tie it back to sort of making a difference to the business in a way that was real. And so that ended up sort of it was well intended, but missed the mark. And after they missed the mark, they just stuck with their good intentions. And I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and that's a perfect segue, so I will push the button on the next slide in just a second. But I do want to make one last observation about this, and I don't have any clarity on it, but I wonder what, this is just kind of rhetorical, I wonder what the rest of the workforce would say about this. would they first of all rank human capital as a top challenge, and then where would they put human resources in that whole continuum? So not the C-suite, but like everybody else. And I don't know, that may, maybe that's another webinar for another time.
Yeah,
but
that's a good
as
question.
Jamie alluded to, I mean, certainly employee engagement was an easy place for us to focus. It was tangible. There were surveys, there were reports, there were numbers. Man, it was easy to talk about. It is easy to talk about. It still is. And it's a good benchmark. It's a good measure of kind of that level of connection, sense of affiliation, belonging, intent to stay, willingness to put forth discretionary effort, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A really good kind of catch-all measurement. But look what's happened. I mean, in the last year, and this is according to obviously a pretty reputable source, global employee engagement scores have increased by only 1%. That one little arm of that one little person, like that's the extent to which employee engagement has increased, and over the last 5, a mere 0.4%. So is this relevant? Like is that really maybe even the kind of the nail in the coffin to relevance, or are we measuring the wrong thing, or I don't know. But Jamie, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, and so this is, I think, illustrating what I was trying to say before, because I think it's demonstrating the irrelevance in the sense that, like, we in HR do not know how to move the needle. I mean, I think that the data here, that's what this is saying. Like, okay, we recognize that, as you said, that engagement is important, discretionary effort matters, this stuff matters, but we can't move the needle, and I think it's because what we do in the human resources field is say, ooh, engagement's important, let's fix engagement, as opposed to, wow, engagement isn't where we need to be, let's diagnose and solve that problem. This is like, if you, I wrote this in the blog post leading up to, if you measured like all the people with clinical depression, I bet you'd find they don't laugh as much as people who don't have that. But that doesn't mean you go and force depressed people to laugh. Like, that's not the answer. That's an indicator. And I think a lot of our efforts in the last 5 years, last 10 years probably, around employee engagement have been like, ooh, I measured that people are unhappy in this way. Let's try and make them happier there. And that's missing the boat. I think engagement is the result. And the result of what I think we're going to talk about, but it's the result, and we haven't done the real true diagnosis work, the true business diagnosis work, to figure out what is the actual problem we need to solve here, and then do it. I think if we did, we'd start moving the needle on this.
So if I were to paraphrase and or simplify, I mean, is this about if we were addressing root cause, we'd see the needle move, right?
Yes.
I mean, we've been.
I firmly believe that.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm obviously I agree with that. I think the biggest challenge is getting to what the root cause is, right? I mean, people have been researching and studying and opining on clinical depression for hundreds of years, right?
Also a tough challenge to solve.
Yeah.
I didn't say this is going to be easy, but I think
no, and
we definitely need to shift our approach.
That's kind of the point, right? Like, it's not as easy as taking a look at the survey results and saying, okay, well, if we could only fix that, right?
Right.
I mean, there needs to be kind of harder and more intentional work around that. So we've got 3 things to think about. Again, like, any conversation about people and work, is obviously more dynamic than 3 things. And your own workplace obviously has lots of context and color and institutional knowledge and muscle memory and these things that will influence. But we kind of thought this was a good place for us to start. And then there will be lots of bullet points to each of these 3. The first, like, I think this is about the difference between providing a commoditized offering and an experience. Like, there are lots of jobs out there, and by and large, we can pretty much, and maybe Jamie will challenge me a little bit on this, but we can pretty much anticipate what we're going to find, what we're going to see when we get there. And that's kind of the commoditized approach. If you can focus on creating an experience, and an experience is something that evokes an emotion or some sort of association, but something that's deeper than a transaction, then you're starting to talk about relevance. And we think one of the best ways to do that is to move from standardization to customization. I think it's probably safe to say that in many worlds over the last, or many organizations over the last 10 years, when HR professionals and or the C-suite talked about strategy, they were really thinking about how do we standardize this? How can we make it efficient and more cost effective? And a lot of those things translate into standardization. Again, we're losing focus on the individual and recognizing that everybody comes to this workplace with a different set of intentions, a different set of aspirations. They're motivated by, encouraged by, driven by a different set of things. How do we get to the level where we can understand what those things are and then respond to them in a way that will speak more relevantly to that individual? Much easier said than done, but this is kind of the first topic. Jamie?
Well, yeah, easier said than done. But what's interesting, so like we did research for the book When Millennials Take Over at a small nonprofit in Chicago called the American Society for Surgery of the Hand. They design their entire organization around the needs of the employees. They're very much about customizing. They literally rewrite job descriptions for every individual every year based on what their specific career goals are. So they have two people with exactly the same job, basically. They will have very different job descriptions because those two people are in different places in their career and are looking at different aspects of the job, and so they end up with different job descriptions. And I presented this at conferences. People are like, well, that's so inefficient. Right, like that takes so much more time to do that, and I'm like, well, okay, I guess it takes a little more time, and maybe it's not as efficient. But you know what they get when they do that? They get employees that say to me, and they literally said this when I did my research there, like, I literally can't imagine working anywhere else. Like they have close to 100% engagement, right? Like they don't lose people. This ties into performance of the organization. They do much more than most nonprofit. I do a lot of work with associations. Most associations that size do not accomplish what they accomplish. They end up getting more done, and so it feels efficient. That piece you just raised about efficiency makes me think like that was HR trying to be strategic. I mean, it was to like save money on the bottom line and be efficient, right? Like maybe that was where that came from, and it's like but you missed the point. I mean, it's fine to be efficient. Go for it. Save some money. But if you're not doing what we're talking about here, if you're not making this an experience that people like connect to in a deep way, then you're never going to tap into that engagement. And I think we traded in that when we went with the efficient route.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say here, and Jamie, I know you'll have a few words on this as well. I mean, just let's take a look around us, all of us today, and even just the digital economy. I mean, there is no successful digital enterprise that is not focused entirely on customization. I mean, from the way the user experience is designed to the ability to order your own customized pair of tennis shoes with color and material and blah blah blah. I mean, like. It is all about the ability to get online and do what you want and to find what you need from how Amazon can anticipate what you're there to buy before you even go to buy it. Like, that's craziness. Why can't we do that same thing with our people? Like, why aren't we in the workplace? Why can't we take the time to understand the individual needs of the employee and provide an offering, a solution, an experience with that in mind?
And I think there are going to be limits to customization. I mean, there's limits to every system like that, and that's fine. But man, we could really be pushing that envelope a lot farther than we are. And again, I think you'll see such amazing performance gains on the other end when you start tapping into that power that it'll justify the extra investment. Then the other answer is, and if you don't like that, if you still don't like that, then that's fine. Stay on the second half of the curve. Like, watch everyone else go by, because this is the direction we're going in, right? This is the future, and like the future is high tech, like the future is focused on the user like that. And if we're not shifting our attention, we will simply just fall further behind.
Yep. So the second topic, broadly, is about agility. And, first things that come to mind are speed, ability to act, to anticipate rather than respond, to manage change seamlessly, to pivot, when we're required to pivot because the environmental factors, the market factors, the workforce factors are kind of asking us to do so, or the clues are showing us that we should. And this is a loaded one. There's a lot here. The quote that we have is one that I've been carrying around with me for a long time, and Jack said it a long time ago. Jack Welch, of course, former CEO, kind of people would call visionary to some degree, certainly an amazing operator for GE, said, why would we have something in our back office that somebody else has in their front office? So, this is a different way of saying, let's figure out what we're really good at and what we're supposed to be good at, and then let's focus on that. And everything else that maybe we're not good at, or we don't want to be good at, but might still be important to the business, let's find somebody else to do it. Now, this is not a conversation or a webinar on outsourcing or offshoring or whatever, but it is about looking at what is on your desk and figuring out, are there things here that are getting in my way of my ability to deliver the kind of value that's going to be felt down to the individual level? And that's, again, what relevance is all about. What's getting in the way? The first thing that people say is, well, I've got this process, and I've got a benefit plan I got to manage, I got a payroll, I've got a so on and so forth. Well, maybe that's not the right stuff for you guys to be focused on. Maybe finance should be doing payroll for you guys. Mm-hmm. Maybe finance ought to be managing benefits. We're seeing that happening in a lot of organizations. But this is about removing the clutter, and potentially redefining what it is that we're focused on. Now, this may mean that we don't have the right people today. I'll be the first to say that. Like, the person that you hired to manage your benefits plan is probably not the same person that you're going to need to think with agility around how to respond to the individual. It's probably the case, but it's a place for us to start. Jamie?
Well, I was going to say, Charlie and I have been having some meetings over the last couple of days where the topic of cognitive load has come up a lot, which is, and there's the first time I came across the term actually was in one of Bob Sutton's books, Scaling Up Excellence. Like, if you want to scale something, then you actually need to create a system where, like what Charlie was just saying, you are not constantly bothered by the thousands of details so that you can focus on the 8 things you need to focus on. Now, the details need to get handled, but you have to build a system that makes sure the details get handled and leave the 8 things to someone who's going to focus on those 8 things. And I feel like that's probably, you're just alluding to it, but I think that's one of the reasons why HR is known as sort of not agile, because they're doing everything and they're not really getting clear, this is in my box, but that other piece, I gotta have someone else handling that box over there. I may be involved in that. It's some details that I'm going to work with because I have the data, I have the expertise, whatever. I've got people on my team that are going to help with that. Fine, but it's not mine, and it's, I don't know, maybe it's a compliance thing or sort of, but I feel like HR doesn't want to let go of that stuff. They want to hold it all, and as long as you hold it all, I think you will end up being slow. This is sort of another one of the conclusions from the research in the book. Like, if you really want speed, you have to give up control. Period. And so you just need to do that smartly. And I don't think we're willing to do it.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Well, and we're not willing. I mean, that's even just a human being thing, not just an HR thing. But it I mean, we hear from a lot of people. I certainly hear from a lot of people. I mean, we just don't have the resources. Like we don't have the people, and maybe that's not about the number of people or the number of resources. Again, maybe it's about the kinds of people or resources. But I kind of wish that somewhere, sometime, someone would send out a all points bulletin to every C-suite on the planet and say, if you guys want class HR, real talent management, people kinds of stuff, then you're going to have to pay for it. Like you cannot staff your business and your HR team the way that you have historically done so and continually ask them to do more and more.
Well,
like that doesn't compute. Right? We don't do that anywhere else. I mean, if we think our technology and our enterprise systems are crucial to our success, we find a way to invest in that. Well, why aren't we doing that in HR?
Yeah, agreed. And I also just in defense.
Maybe that's just a little bit of a, but
No, in defense of HR, I think organizations across the board are bad at agility. Right, we're seeing this in the culture assessment that we've developed, the Workplace Genome. Right, like we measure 8 culture markers: innovation, transparency, collaboration, growth, etc. Agility is one of them, and that one is consistently lower across the board, and that's regardless of size or nonprofit, for-profit. Like it's not like not a huge difference, but it's on the slower end. A more traditional end on our scale, because I think this is something everybody struggles with.
Yeah. I mean, this is maybe one of those things because of that alone, Jamie. I mean, I think if agility is something that organizations struggle with, maybe that's another way for HR to become relevant. Like, become the purveyors of agile.
Yeah, really. Be a leader on this, and you'll get people's attention, I think. So I think that's true.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, there aren't maybe a lot of experts out there that are doing it today, so maybe HR can step into that role. All right, anything more on agility, Jamie, before we move to the next one?
Yeah, jump ahead.
Why don't you kick this one off?
Yeah, so the third piece, which to me, again, I've been focusing on culture for a long time, so maybe that's just what I see because I'm focusing on it. But I think a big piece to making HR relevant is owning the culture space, which I think it's been trying to do. I mean, we're seeing more HR folks getting like chief culture officer or chief people and culture officer. Culture's coming in their title, which is good. But it's not just owning the culture space. I want HR to own the culture space and make sure it ties very, very specifically to the growth of the enterprise. Okay, and I think that's, I guess, maybe what I was saying in the very beginning. Like we're trying to appear strategic rather than be strategic. If you want to be strategic, then you will do things in your job, this is what everyone else does, that drive growth. And growth can be defined in a bunch of ways. There's certainly bottom line growth or sales growth. Like there's sort of the obvious numbers growth, but there can be sort of nonprofits growth in terms of your ability to achieve the mission, growth in terms of the depth and quality of the work you're doing. Like there's lots of ways to look at this, but if our cultures are not tied directly to what drives our success, then we're not doing it right. And I feel like we spend so much of our time in HR saying, "Ooh, we're in charge of culture. Quick, plan the company picnic." I'm like, I'm not gonna shouldn't say this too loud. I'm sitting in one of our partners' office is a tech company in DC, and they have this stereotypical foosball table out there. I'm like, really, guys? Like that's it. I don't like if you can convince me that drives growth, then cool. Then get 6 more foosball tables. But like if it's not clear, I don't want to see that. And I feel like every organization has a genetic code, right, a culture code, and if you sculpt that correctly, you can turn it into a growth engine. Like you can make that drive growth. That's what will attract the top talent. That's what actually generates the behaviors that make your company more successful, because that's what culture does, right? It basically tells people this is valued and that is not. Therefore, I'm going to do this. And if you have a really rotten culture like Enron did, then it's going to get behaviors that get you in huge trouble. If you have a really amazing culture like the sort of culture cool kids like Zappos, et cetera, have, then you generate amazing results. And I think HR needs to own that space. I don't think they're stepping up into it.
Yeah, can you imagine like if you were to run into a CHRO at a cocktail party and say like, what do you do? And they said, well, I drive growth for the business.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
tell me more. Well, I mean, I hire the kinds of people that are going to do and offer and contribute and serve our clients the way that we need them to. I create opportunities for our best and brightest. I mean, it suddenly becomes a different conversation, right? It's not even really about the employee. It's about the business is our people, and therefore, we drive growth when we have the right people, not even the best people, like the right people for this business. What's your quote, Jamie, that I think is like enough to get you thrown into jail with most of corporate America, which is like, if people were our most important asset, we.
Right. No, yeah, I wrote that in the blog post. Like, our people are our most important asset. A smart CEO would say, if that were true, I'd sell some of them and to take the proceeds and invest in growth. Like,
right.
If that's what we do with assets, right? So if you think that your goal is to make your people your assets, you've missed the point. Your goal is to, and I think, sharpen and refine and grow a culture that aligns what is valued internally very clearly with what drives success. I think that is so overlooked, even in the culture literature, frankly, because it's all about, we need to keep up with our core values and like all this. I'm like, no, okay, that's fine. Your core values are great, but I want to make sure that you're choosing a value that doesn't sound cool, like integrity. Because who doesn't want integrity? I want you to prove to me that people who tell the truth all the time leads us to a place where we are succeeding more in business. And if you can make that case, in many cases you can, so I'm not saying you can't, but if you can make it, then run it and do it. And then I'm telling you that seat at the table is going to open right up because they're going to see the value.
Yeah, and a couple of things to be said about that. I mean, so one, growth. I mean, I think growth can mean a lot of things to a lot of people and to a lot of organizations. I mean, for some it can mean top line, it can mean bottom line, it could mean evolution and maturity. I mean, it could mean moving into a new product area. It could be tapping into a new segment of the workforce. I mean, all of that is growth, and that is what is front of mind of most successful C-suites, right? Is it's really all about growth in one direction or another. I mean, can you imagine walking into your CEO's office and saying, hey, I've got an awesome idea that's going to really help us grow this company, instead of saying, I've got an awesome idea that's going to really help us get a better score on our employee engagement survey?
Yeah, exactly.
Those are that's all of a sudden, I think the person on the other end of the table is going to raise their eyebrows and say, tell me more.
Right, and I'll add. So let me add one thing though, because I think, and here's a secret weapon for HR. You want to get in on this conversation. I think so. Driving growth, like everyone's really clear that that's valuable, but I think even the rest of the C-suite doesn't even know what drives their growth. Like, I don't think we're very good at being clear at what drives our success in organizations, and so a smart HR leader is going to sort of dig into that conversation before they even show up at the C-suite, and actually have some data that says, you know what, these over here, these parts of our organization have been more successful and they're doing X, Y, and Z. Maybe we need to replicate that. That conversation sort of needs to be amplified as well.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. Okay, so I want you to take this one too.
Yeah, so this is sort of our closing point, and we're going to open up to any questions that have come in. But this is actually the title of the last chapter, When Millennials Take Over, is Proceed Until Apprehended. And this is a quote from Florence Nightingale. This is basically her mantra as she effectively invented the modern hospital as a woman in the 19th century, which is pretty impressive. Proceed until apprehended is basically one of the things that I beg of the HR community, which is stop asking for permission. Stop waiting for people to approve you or to approve you to do things and start doing. There's a little bit of the it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission thing, but this is more like, you know what, go, do, take action. Run some experiments, and very more specifically, run some experiments that are going to generate some results that you can show to the C-suite or to anyone else, frankly, in the organization, so that when they do apprehend you, because you're doing something that hasn't been done before, isn't how how we've always done it. When they do stop you and say, whoa, 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 this is not how we do things here, you can say, oh, I know it's not how we do things here, but look, I ran this experiment and I got these cool results. How about we just expand that? Because I do think that's something that most people will listen to is the results piece. So for God's sake, HR, stop spending 3 weeks developing your business case to convince someone to say yes before you do it. Start doing it and bring the results to them. That's going to increase your agility. That's going to increase their respect for you at the C-suite, all the things that we've been wanting. But stop waiting for permission.
Yeah, I mean, I wish someone would have said that to me a long time ago, and I'm glad you mentioned that this has a lot to do with a lot of the cultural markers that we measure. I mean, just this is about an implicit permission to experiment and to take risks and to do so wisely, obviously, and to find the right people that can do that. I always wonder why we go out of our way and we spend so much time hiring people who we trust with our products and our clients and each other, and yet we don't trust them to make decisions or to try things that might be better without putting them through this entire process. Like, isn't the whole point of finding the right person for your business is that you're trusting them to do what they need to do? Yeah. I mean, this would be another one that if HR could stand up for and take some leadership on, and helping the organization get more comfortable with the proceed until apprehended philosophy, that who knows what kind of value that would add.
Well, because this is right at the heart of innovation, right? Innovation is the big buzzword, right? Like, oh, our company needs innovation. Well, and I guarantee you right now they're not saying, oh, we need some innovation. Let's see if we can find some models in HR. Right? Like, that's not happening, but it could be if you did this, if you experimented wisely, if you chose things. Like, as a CEO once told me, like, okay, if you're going to run an experiment, if you're going to punch holes in the boat, do it above the waterline. Okay, like those right? So, don't just experiment like crazy, but be strategic about it, choose it wisely, and because that's another thing that we're finding in the markers. Innovation as a marker, I think, is doing pretty well, but within it, the specific building blocks, there's a division. There's lots on there's everyone's going all in on creativity and hacking things, right? Hacking is cool now, but taking risks and testing new ideas is showing on the other end of the scale, and that's one of the reasons why we think we're doing innovation well, because we're making these creativity rooms for people to play in. But if you're not testing new ideas and letting people experiment, it doesn't go anywhere. The learning doesn't happen. So again, I think HR could really.
Well, and testing them in a way that goes beyond just as you said, in this controlled environment. Like, you've got to be willing to take it out there and actually see what happens.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we're bumping up against 40 minutes right now, and I don't know if there are any questions in the queue or not, but I do want to make sure that we take a second or two for that, and then we can, have some closing thoughts, if any. Karen, is there anything floating around out there that we want to respond to?
Hi, just one question, and actually it pertains to my company too. So
We lost you. At least I lost you, Karen. If you're talking,
it's a secret question.
Hello?
She can't tell.
Hi,
oh,
sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Sorry, I think the Wi-Fi blinked out for a bit. But we just have a question, probably more pertinent to people in the Bay Area, although obviously to anyone in the tech space. But, many startups, when they start, HR is not in the conversation because everyone's worried about, let's build something that actually makes revenue. But just from your personal experience, at what size or what scale does HR really become necessary for a company that's growing from maybe a garage office into an actual corporate, building?
Yeah. I think Jamie and I would both have a different answer to this question. It's a really difficult one because I think it has a lot to do with philosophy and your culture code, quite frankly, what it is you're trying to preserve, what it is you're trying to maintain. The unfortunate answer is that you really don't need HR, really need HR as defined today functionally until you got to start worrying about things like benefit plans or hiring people. I would like to suggest, however, that if you find the right HR people, the ones that are really focused on being relevant, and relevance being focused on understanding the culture and what drives success and how to then align the talent base with all of those things, that it ought to be an early hire. I mean, the sooner they can be there, the more effective they're going to be in understanding what got you to where you are, what you need to go forward, focusing on the kinds of people that you're going to need to hire 5 years from now, not tomorrow. Really laying the workforce strategy and the foundation for your culture in a way that becomes harder and harder and harder as you get further down the tracks. So I don't know that there's a 30-day, 90-day, 60-day kind of thing, but I do think that it's really a lot to do with what it is you're trying to commit your organization to. Jamie?
Well, yes. Yeah, I mean, I just sort of make the key point that when you're, as soon as you go to two people, now you are trying to align behavior of multiple human beings in a way that drives success. Therefore, you need that function in someone's box. Okay, you need someone paying attention to that. It does not have to be a chief HR officer as one of the two people, but we need to sort of make it clear that culture drives behavior, which drives success, and so that's got to be managed. And I think to Charlie's point, I think that piece does need to be explicitly managed before the benefits stuff, and that one gets before you need that function sort of managed. So I would rather be hiring someone in an HR position earlier than you think you need to, would be my short answer.
Yeah, and by the way, maybe this gets a little bit too practical or pragmatic, but if in fact you're basing your decision on when it is you need to implement a benefits plan or start hiring people, guess what? You don't really need an HR person for that. You go find a third party that can do that for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there are plenty, and you'll never have to worry about it. Don't focus on hiring those kinds of HR people first. Focus on hiring someone with the broader point of view about, culture and relevance and work and blah, blah, blah. So, okay, so anything else pop in there, Karen?
Just one last question, and I think we're kind of pushing for time. But so you've mentioned, everyone has like unique work cultures that you can't really say what's good for one person necessarily good for another one. But are there 3 kind of universal like warning signs one can see in HR across the board? Like if there's 3 things that people almost universally do wrong, or when you see, I mean, obviously you guys meet and greet a lot of companies, you must have seen a lot of different kind of work cultures. Are there 3 things that when you see, you're like, oh, this is a problem?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. I don't know that there are any 3 other than it becomes readily apparent when there is something out of alignment in an organization. And for an organization, that could be about agility, it could be about transparency, it could be about collaboration, it could be about any one of those things. But the reason it's out of alignment is because it is really very crucial to their becoming successful or being successful. There are some signs. If you can have a conversation with somebody who's 30 days in and say, are you experiencing kind of what you signed up for? Like, are you experiencing the culture in the way that you thought it was going to be? Like that's a good indicator of whether or not things are living as they kind of should be. Jamie, what's your response to that question?
Well, I mean, I guess the big indicator for me is particularly when the senior level does not actually know what the culture is. Right, so at that point, it doesn't matter what the culture actually is. The fact that they don't know means it's going bad. Like I had a CEO who did some engagement surveys and the scores went down even though they tried to make them go up. And I remember talking to her and she's like, I don't get it. Like, who wouldn't want to work in this place? You know, I'm like, well, yeah, you're the CEO. Like, so she's in this bubble of like, this is a cool place to work, but she's out of touch with what the legitimate experience, back to one of our earlier points, is of the employees in that workspace. She does not know that. And you don't have to know all the details, but you got to have a sense. And every really strong company I've been in, they have a clear sense. They don't know all the details, but they get it and they understand it. And if you're missing that, then it's eventually going to fall apart.
Yeah, and I have one parting thought, and then Karen, I know we need to shut her down. But you know, an interesting way to put into practice what Jamie just described is just go around and ask people, tell me what it's really like to work here, and just listen to what you get back. And if it's a lot of kind of superficial buzzword kind of stuff, you know, maybe you don't know that, or maybe we collectively don't know that as well as we should, or at the level that we could. You know, I mean, if you're starting to get some really kind of interesting, like, stories, you know, like stuff with context and meaning and experience to it, then you've got a deeper understanding of that culture. That understanding says a lot about how strong your culture is. So I've loved this. It was a good conversation. Obviously, we go on and on and on. Thanks, Question Pro, for inviting Jamie and I and WorkXO in general to be part of this series. We'd love to connect with any of you that are interested in talking more about this. We're always interested in connecting with enthusiasts. Look us up on WorkXO. I'm HR Fishbowl on Twitter. Jamie is Jamie Notter. Karen, back over to you to shut it down.
All right. Again, reach out. Feel free to reach out to us through email or Twitter. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with the recording and a summary of it. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.